Anyhow, with no further ado, we have Mr. King now, formerly Dr. King, who's head of counseling at NSC. And we look so forward and we appreciate you taking your Sunday afternoon.
Thank you. It might move around a bit. Tell me if I go up. I don't know if you know, but the Council Gardens was set up to be Camellias or Corsarias. I don't know if you knew that. And that's why there might be 300 or 400 other claimants there. The trouble was they're harder to ship, and then orchids sort of took over that business. But if you go to the Wisconsin Gardens, it is just a forest of camellias, and is just beautiful. Still, we really have the trifecta of camellias here in Southern California. We have Wisconsin Gardens, and we have Huntington, which has 2 big camellia gardens, and even when they do the new Japanese garden and remodel it in the Chinese garden, they're introducing new camellias. And third is Nuccio's Nursery. Nuccio's Nursery has been in business since 1935. I'm not connected to them, but they are world famous with camellias and azaleas. And they've introduced about 205 or something like that camellias over the years, and I'll show you some today. And also, I'm not sure, maybe you historians know, but this is Woodruff Street right here. I think it's named after Bill Woodruff, who was a big camellia man. And it would have been that, I don't know when that road was put in here, but my guess is it's spelled the same way. He developed the Southern California Camellia nomenclature, which I know it. So Temple City's had a long history, and I'm pretty sure that it's Bill Woodruff, William Woodruff. I don't know where the history is and how you named your streets, but that would be my guess. So if you want to look at that, please do. Those of you who come from other places like Chicago, I came from Boston, that's why I fell in love with camellias. About a dozen camellias were in my house in Arcadia, and I was awestruck to be able to see flowers in February. And I had to find out about them. And I'd ask my neighbors, and they'd say things like, oh, that's a red camellia, that's a pink camellia. No, I need to know the name. So I went to Nuccio's Nursery because someone told me how good they were. And they really are world famous. And you know, it's an Italian-American family, almost 3 generations, because grandparents helped the boys out when they went off to World War II. Yes, World War II. And then now their sons are running it. And we call them the boys. Jude is 73, my age. Tom is 65, and Jim's the baby at 63. So, but that's how a lot of, remember, this is the way America was. People handed over businesses. Now the kids aren't interested. They don't use computers. You can give them a check or cash. I've gone out with friends and they'll say, well, I didn't bring the check and I don't have that much cash. Yeah, take the camellias home and send us a check. You know, this is the way America used to be. And now you go any place and if you don't have your charge card or check, maybe not even with a check, they'll still take cash. So it's a different world. I also noticed you have literature from the St. Gabriel Nursery. That's also a very, very well-known nursery, and the founding fathers, I believe, were interred at some point when we interred Japanese Americans. Not a high point of our history, but it happened, and it has continued somehow through the family. Again, I don't know all the history of that. So my title of my little talk is Camellias, the Queen of the Winter Garden. They're really a beautiful evergreen small tree or shrub, and they like to grow in dappled sunlight, shade. In my neighborhood, and probably yours, you'll see a lot on the east side or the north side of the house. In my neighborhood, it's like some of the ones you were describing. A lot of camellias were on the north side between the houses, and when they build new houses, they rip them out. But they're still there in many places. They like well-drained enormous soil, and they cannot dry out. They hate being dry, and they don't like being soggy. So we have to water them. That's one of the complaints. People say they're too much water. I don't think that's such a big deal. We water our lawns, we can water a camellia. Now, they're originally from Southeast Asia. None of them are indigenous or native to America. So they've all been imported at one point or another. And of course, there's been lots of hybridization. About 80% are from Southeast China. Let's see, I gotta point that way. This is a good example of a camellia tree. This is in Descanso Gardens, Alina Nobile. Alina Nobile came to America in 1840 to Magnolia Gardens and Plantation in Charleston. That's an old private garden, and they imported it. This is how many camellias got here. One of the main ways was wealthy homeowners like Huntington, Manchester Bodie, people like that, and the Dryden family. Whoop, went the wrong way, didn't I? No, I didn't. Do have this. When we talk about species, species are all in the Camellia family. And there's 280. The most common one is the one you're all very, very familiar with, although you may not know it's a camellia. And that's Camellia sinensis, the tea plant. So we, tea, whether it's iced tea is the most popular in America. We had some today. And then I did my Anno Parma routine and put some lemonade in with it. So we drink more iced tea in America than we do hot tea. But worldwide, tea is the most popular beverage in the world. About 80 countries grow tea. In America, there's only 3 small places. One, a berry farmer, Japanese-American berry farmer in the state of Washington, and a few collective farms in Hawaii, in the volcano, which is the big island. There's a few small gardens there, and then the Charleston plantation and tea. What most of you are growing in this neighborhood are probably Camellia japonicas. That's the classic, beautiful, evergreen, beautiful leaves all year long, and lovely flowers. If you have landscape plants that bloom in the fall, November, December, small leaves and small flowers, but lots of blooms, it's probably a Camellias of Sancor, and they will grow in the sun, even in full sun. And then very large flowers, the Camellia reticulata. And now people hybridized all over the place. There's a lot of key hybridization here in California and the Southeast. Now we divide Camellias into Camellia who have reticulata in them and non-retic hybrids. So I'll talk to you about some of those too. This is what the tea plant flower looks like. It's about the size of your fingernail, and usually it's pretty nondescript because we're not really interested in the flower, we want the foliage. And whether you're doing green tea, brown tea, black tea, it's all tea, except that it's how the leaves are prepared. Tamano Ora is really a good example of a single. There's only less than 7 petals. It's very bright and perky, and one of the reasons it's so popular is that is a genetic white border. And that if you hybridize with that genetic white border, you can get other very nice camellias. This is a Nuccios. Nuccios have hybridized. They have 9 tamas. Tama peacock, I think, is the best of them. And here you can see it's a little more complicated flower. We call that semi-double. It's got more than 7 petals and less than 30. And I use both those cultivars in my breeding program because they set seeds readily. Some just like humans, some people you look at them and they get pregnant, other can't. Well, these two set seeds like crazy. And others just don't for whatever genetic reason. One of my favorite flowers is wildfire. And one of the reasons I like it so much is as you're facing that camellia, if you look to the right, you see my window. That's where I sit, type, drink coffee, read the newspaper, write camellia articles. My wife's across the way doing the same thing. And sometimes this is what we see. We see the beautiful Anna's hummingbird, which lives with us all winter long, along with the Allen's and Anna's hummingbirds we're lucky they live with us all year long. Sometimes they go to the Camellias. This one looks like it's a male, right? Because of the red gorget or throat patch and the little rusty red sides. He's actually guarding the bird feeder on that window. Now, when I first got interested, like Bill Woodruff was noted to say, to be a camellia, it needs to be bathed in red. Well, I agreed with him when I first came out here, and I wanted big red flowers, so I got Grand Prix. Now, this is actually much darker than it looks in that photograph. It's called Royal Velvet. And again, you can see it's large and it's semi-double. And again, it's named in an interesting way. Jim Nuccio, they were trying to figure out what to name this, was on the throne, and he was looking at the bathroom mat, and he saw a nice dark red camellia. He flipped over and saw the tag, Royal Velvet, and that's how Royal Velvet became a camellia. So we do some of our best thinking on the throne, apparently. The other thing we do in camellia world, we take Royal Velvet and we introduce a camellia virus, and it produces these white blotches that make, some people say, oh, we don't want to do this. I'm a proponent, I like it, I think it makes nothing more beautiful than a dark red flower with white markings. So we variegate it intentionally or unintentionally. But if you like big pink flowers, we have Katie. The Nuccios named it Katie after their grandmother, Catherine Nuccio. And it was a seedling of a camellia she loved called Drama Girl. So if you like big and pink, you get Katie. Now when you variegate Katie, I think you got even a prettier flower. I really love this. In fact, I named my puppy Katie, and I walk with her every day in the morning. I keep her on a leash because I'm worried about coyotes. I don't see them often, but they're in Arcadia. Apparently they're around and about. But again, you can see it's a beautiful semi-double flower. Now, if you were in a camellia show and obsessive like I am, you look at this flower and say, isn't that beautiful? But you see that 12 o'clock petal? It needs a couple more spots of white to be perfect. But you know Mother Nature, she does what she wants and not what we hope for. It's still beautiful, yes. But maybe you want a really black, dark, different looking camellia. This is called Black Magic. And I took this picture of it in Huntington. And it's very thick and waxy petals. You can almost see it here, it looks kind of thick. And you know what's funny? It's introduced by Nuccios. Most of us don't grow it, we like it. If you want an unusual camellia, in terms of color, fine. The Southeast, they grow it all the time at wind shows. So maybe it's like some of us, we had to move away from hometown to get the recognition we wanted. You don't always get it in your own hometown. One of my favorites is this. This is a semi-double, very large, Betty Foy Sanders. It's white with red variegation. It's named for the wife of the governor of Georgia at that time. But I just love that. You can see my hand holding it up to get a good angle on it. Now, there's also beautiful little flowers. This is Tinkerbell. And this, we've been looking at semi-double flowers. This is an anemone flower named after the sea anemone. It sort of looks a little like a sea anemone. And the petals, the stamens have begun to turn into petaloids and make that nice center cluster. And you may or may not see other stamens in it. And then the outside we call it dark petals. But maybe you want something another cute little one, like Cutie Doll. Sort of a chalky white, blush white, a cute little flower. And they're, by small, 2.5 inches. But maybe you want a red one. So here we got Bob's Tinsy. I kind of like it because the petaloids are both red and white, plus there's some stamens sticking out, so you got, a cluster of different colors. Now, if you like white, you got, excuse me, I forgot I had Rudolph in here. Rudolph is just a beautiful red anemone flower. The Nuccia is named it after Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So that's an award-winning bloom. Here's a white one, again, so if you prefer white. I don't know about you, but growing white flowers is always a little mark here or a slug bit something, and it's very hard to get a perfect white flower. And when you do, it really is a beautiful. Now, if you want a big white flower, you've got elegant champagne. I don't know about you, but I'm sipping a glass of champagne. I can almost see the bubbles coming right out of the center there. It's kind of delicious looking. The yellow tone is really the stamens. It's a white flower. And it's a mutation. Camellias mutate a lot. And if you have them, if you have Hermia in your yard, which I'll show you a picture of, you might see it in its pink form too. It's sports all. We call it sporting. It's a genetic mutation. Now we move from anemone flowers to loose peony. Lady Laura is one of my favorites too. I love the multicolor pink with the red slashes and dashes, and it's just a beautiful, late, lovely camellia. And all of these so far are japonicas. Cherries Jubilee, sort of like the dessert, you know, sort of delicious. You can almost eat that. I love the little white petaloids sticking out in a beautiful, beautiful flower. All of these you can grow in your home garden. Now we move to Margaret Davis is a sport that came from Australia. Mrs. Davis, or actually Mr. Davis named it after his wife, Margaret. And you can see that beautiful white with the vermilion or reddish tone around the edge. That's really another gorgeous flower. This one you may have. It's a very, very popular camellia, and it's iconic full peony. You don't see any stamens. When it's a baby, it doesn't bloom too well, but boy, if you've had one a few years, it blooms very reliable, big, puffy, pink. It's just very nice. It'll take more sun than some japonicas too, so. Now we get into some interesting hybridization. This is called Spring Days. I kind of like the way they, D-A-Y-S, D-A-Z-E, sort of a fun name someone gave it. This is probably a rose form double, but I wanted to show it to you because it's a hybrid between a Salienensis species and japonica. Now on the left is how it grows in my yard. And I went to discount, so I looked at 2 bushes. There might have been 35 or 40 buds and flowers. Most of them are like the one on the left. Am I knocking everything off? Sorry about that. We'll get that later. The one on the left is how it grows here in Southern California. But if you go to Bakersfield in Sacramento, it blooms like the one on my right. Very different. Now, why does that happen? Who knows? The microclimates are different. I can't get it to do that. And, Mother Nature and the climates dictate. They're both beautiful. This is a classic Camellia japonica, what we call the rose form. The one on the left of the screen opens like a hybrid tea rose. There's no stamens. It looks very clustered. It's sort of all formed up. But if you wait 3 days, 5 days, a week, it begins to show its stamens and opens up like a rose and that's not exactly the same flower, but they do that regularly. Glen Nursery had this flower in bed 40, so they called it Glen 40. A very nice variegated, again, that's virus variegation. Now we come to, some people would say, the most complicated, the most beautiful flowers, camellias, and that's the formal doubles. Case Water is a Japanese American in the south, in the Macon area, and this was his dream. He's just the opposite, where we interpret people like the the family members of the St. Gabriel Nursery. The Camellia people and everyone knew Casewater, and they said, if anyone comes to bother you, let us know. So the gendarmes were aware of his presence. He was so American that he was never interred, and continued to run a very successful hybridizing and breeding business. Now, what it has is no stamens, and the female parts also atrophied, so it's sterile. So it's the end of a breeding line, but they certainly are gorgeous. I know my daughter-in-law, these are her favorite camellias, so if you like Swatters green, great. If you like white, we've got Nuccio's Gem. This is a very popular, very, very beautiful formal double. Nuccio's Pearl is also similar, but it's got a little more pink around the edge and a little rounded petals. Again, a very good grower, very prolific, blooms readily. And then if you like red formal doubles, this is a more recent Nuccio's introduction. Nuccio's Bella Rosa is on the right, and the variegated form is on the left of the screen. If you like a pink formal double, you've got Nuccio's Cameo. Again, I think that's a gorgeous flower, and it's big, 4 to 5 inches. They named this one Joe Nuccio after, it was Julius Sr. and Joe were the founding fathers. Joe is deceased, Julius is 92 and still around and sharp, but he's not in the nursery business anymore, he's retired. But what I like about this is the formal double, but it has incurved petals, so you can get almost every color, shape, and some slight variations of form. This is another hybrid, meaning it's a japonica with something else, but not a reticulata. Nuccio as buttons and bows. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little hole in the leaf next to the bud on the left-hand side of the screen. When I want to introduce gibberellic acid to make a flower bloom early and large, I clip off the growth bud with my fingernail, put a drop of gibberellic acid in the hole that's remaining, but I also mark the adjoining leaf. So the goal here is that it will be much bigger than 3 inches and would bloom early. So you might get them for Thanksgiving, or you might have some other for decorations. This is just a beautiful non-retic hybrid. You know, it's a Coral Delight variegated. It was grown here, produced here at McCaskill's garden in Pasadena. You know, Pasadena, before in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and all, had 35 Camellia and Azalea nurseries. And you know what happened? We all came and we knocked down the nurseries and put up markets and houses and all sorts of things. So basically it's the St. Gabriel nursery, which is a wide range nursery, and Nuccio's for Camellias and Azaleas. So there were lots of very good. Some of you who, if you've lived here all your life, may have known where McCaskill's were. I'm not exactly sure it was. I think it was somewhere near Baldwin Avenue in the Pasadena area. I don't know about you, but I love the way those hybrids begin to pick up some different colors. This is sort of a corally pink. You know, I could be in South Pacific looking at the sunset and see that beautiful color, or maybe I'm in the Virgin Islands, but you can really pick up the beautiful coral pink flowers. It's a very stunning flower. Or maybe you want something very different, something black-red. This is Night Rider. It was it's bred by Ozzie Blumhart in New Zealand. And he took an old camellia called Koro Tushabaki. Tushabaki means camellia, basically, like a japonica. And bred this little dark red. And now we've studied it, and they've done some genetic studies, and they found it's due to a long chromosome that that produces that dark red. You know, we're all the benefit of all the genetic studies and cell studies for health reasons, but they also have helped with our crops, especially corn and rice and things like that. The geneticists aren't interested in camellias so much. There's no money in that, right? It's going to be healthcare or food products, citrus and things like that. Well, here's the other big, we've been looking at hybrids and japonicas. This is Camellia reticulata. This is one of the original 20 that came to America, to Descanso Garden and to North Hollywood, to Ralph Peer, and it's called Camellia. And you can see it's already variegated. So it's been variegated in China and came to us in 1940. And that was really where they began, this Descanso Garden. That was where they were first introduced. And this one, Frank Hauser, is probably the most popular reticulata camellia in the world today. It wins in Southern California shows, it wins in Charleston, it wins in Florida, and it was bred by Dr. Homeyer of Macon, Georgia, and his friend, Dr. Frank Hauser, was looking over the fence and said, "Hey, that's a beautiful camellia." And Homeyer said, "I don't think much of it." "Oh no, you got to save that one." So he said, "All right, what do you want me to call it? Frank Hauser, Dr. Hauser?" Anyway, they decided on Frank Hauser. Now you know I'm a nut. I ripped that flower apart. It had 28 petals. Well, it looks like a peony form, but if you need 30 to be a peony form, it's still a semi-double. Now, this is the more typical Frank Hauser. It's a semi-double. I like the way the Chinese describe this. They call it semi-double with butterfly wings. You know, you can sort of see and about the only reticulata that competes with Frank Hauser and might beat them is Frank Hauser variegated. Now, how many of you are mothers here? Well, not men, but mothers. You know what my wife did, the mother of my 45-year-old son? Well, we need to get him a Frank Hauser variegated. So we go up to Nuccio's nursery, and I buy one for me and one for him. You know who got the best one? The one with all the buds on it? Mom gave it to son. I finally got a bloom this year, 3 years later. So, boys, we know where we stand. Anyway, it's a beautiful flower too. I put Larry Pete in because he was hybridized here in Arcadia. Meyer Pete lived on Nokia, right? Well, you know where the freeway is, and then there used to be a Nokia Estates. I don't know if that was Lucky Baldwin's or not. A Nokia Estates?
And Nokia. Yeah. Baldwin and Foothill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, they took down the estate and they got all kinds of houses there. But right in the back street was where Meyer and Bev Pete lived, and they bred camellias in the backyard. So they named it after their son, Larry Pete. So we have some, you know, that Meyer Pete and Lee Gator, his buddy Lee Gator, they worked together, Gator and Pete, introduced about 27 reticulatas, a dozen japonicas, and other things. So it's a nice reticulata. And I include Alaska Beauty because Dr. Clifford Parks, when he was horticultural at the Los Angeles Arboretum, grew this, and that's the original name. Los Angeles, LA, State and County Arboretum. Now, of course, we've changed the name. It's not called that anymore. I think it's what, Los Angeles County Botanical Gardens. But that was the name, and people say, "Oh, what a beautiful Asian name." No, LA, State and County, beauty. But it is a beauty. I guess she's gone so I can talk about sex. The petals are what we all love, and the yellow are the male parts, the stamens. And as you know, pollen gets on everything. If you look real closely, right in the center stage, sort of light green is the female part. And that's, you know, every flower has to have sexual parts or they don't reproduce to make seeds. And this shows that beautifully. So now if I were hybridizing, I cut off, when it's a bud, not this open, cut off all the petals, all the stamens, and leave just the female part right in the center. See, it's different than humans. The female stands straight up, straight, proud. And if you want to hybridize, you get your choice of pollen and put it on the female part. Put a bag on it, protect it from other pollinators, especially bees and things like that, which we're glad to have, of course. Anyway, just a little aside. But we have to remember, if if our flowers don't bloom and produce, we can't reproduce, we can't get, what's the big crop up there, almonds, right? And all those things, you have to have pollinators. Whoop, sorry, did I just? Okay, good. Sorry about that. John Hunt came to us from Australia, and John named it after himself. And you can see this is a big, beautiful, these are really big flowers. By that I mean 5 inches. In fact, the Nuccios who were telling me a story, they said they heard in the back, people been to Nuccios? It's not like Armstrong's, it's acres of property, and it's, you gotta watch your step because the paths are all, anyway, they heard this curdling scream from some woman, and they rushed there, thought she'd fallen or injured herself. No, she'd seen her first John Hunt, and it was huge. So the next day she sent her husband back. You know, guys, how it goes. She liked it, you go back, you have to buy it. She then cut the flower off, and Sunday night at the church dinner, she wore it as a hat. So I don't know how it looked, but it was big enough to cause a show, apparently. Anyway, it's a beautiful flower. Now this, we're talking about, most of them are not semi-doubles. This is a true peony form. Yes, I ripped it apart and counted, you can't count every flower you grow, but you gotta count more than 2, and you're gonna get 10, 20, 30, maybe even more. And it's a beautiful, big, solid red ball. The good thing and bad thing about Harold L. Page is it blooms mid to late season, so you can see them in April, maybe even May. But what happens here, it gets really hot in April and sometimes May, and shrinks the size and might be not as to your liking. But when it does its thing, it's a beautiful, beautiful. Another very nice reticulata that's a peony form is Ruta Hagman. And I love the coral colors, and pink and coral and white. And like a lot of Camellia people, it's named after his wife. Mr. Hagman named it after his wife, Ruta. I've heard people say, I would never own a Camellia with that name, Ruta Hagman. Ugh. Well, I looked up Ruta. This is where it's really good to be able to have the internet. First of all, Ruta is a Swiss name, and it means friend. Hagman, in the 17th century and earlier, was only one N, and if you look up Hagman, it means sort of like grove of trees. And then, like many European Americans and others, they were Swiss, and about a group of them migrated to Virginia, and then some of them came out here to California, and that's where Mr. Hagman grew this beautiful flower. He's not alive, his wife is still alive, and I think it's just gorgeous. I love it. And I don't care, I like the name. It's very distinct. Now we talked about Reticulatus japonicus. These are the sun camellias. These are great for landscaping, beautiful flowers. The first Sasanquas, Camellia sasanquas, is a species, and the cultivar or variety is Old Glory. When they first came to us from Japan, they were simple white flowers, but over the years they bred more and more camellias and hybrids of the sasanqua type. And this is one of the where they're white with either pink, red, vermilion edges, and I think it makes a really very, very nice landscape plant. Profuse flowers, smaller leaves than the japonica, and this one has sort of a crinkly petals, sort of like the flag. I think that's how they got the name, the Old Glory. But there's others. This is also a McCaskill garden introduction. As I said, I know he was in Pasadena. It's now out of business. But it's sort of hose and hose, or a one star superimposed on a second star, especially the bottom flower. And then it's white with a nice lavender color. So again, you get a wide range of colors and seasons. Yigao is a Chinese flower, and it's translated to smiling faces. It's, again, in between a japonica and a sasanquas. So the flower's a little bigger, the leaves are a little larger, but they bloom in December and January. It makes a nice show, very pretty flower. You might have seen Yuletide. It's in, you'll see it in Armstrong's, you'll see it in lots of places. This particular one is, it's a Nuccio, and it's probably the most popular sasanquas for landscaping. If you've been to USC, the Alumni House has double row around 3/4 of the building. And when that's in bloom in November and December and maybe January, it's really spectacular. It really is a gorgeous set of flowers. You must have seen Pink Perfection. You must have them around here. It's beautiful, small, formal double, and it is almost close to perfection. Toshi Demoto in the late 1800s imported this. He was a local, Toshi's from Oakland. And he put the first ones in the state capitol, in that garden there. There's a Camellia garden right there in the state capitol building area near them.
Isn't that a miniature?
It's a small. Yes, yeah, I'm sure there are. It's hard to beat. It's mid to late season, and it's like a cookie cutter, flower after flower. That's gorgeous. And so you might have one in your yard, and they're undoubtedly around. And it's spread everywhere. When I spread, it's been distributed, Northern California, Southern California, the South, but it originated in Japan. Pope Pius, or Prince Eugene Napoleon, was imported by Magnolia Gardens in the 1840s to America from France, and now is widely distributed. When I moved into my house, there were 7 of them. I cut them off and grafted more exciting camellias, but there's nothing wrong with that flower. It's a beautiful formal double. It has a minor flaw for those who are obsessive like me in flower shows. So it's got little white marks on it. But if you have one, cherish it. They're probably around too. I mean, they're very nice. This one's another one that you might see around, Methodiana. And when the Magnolia family, the Drottons, imported it from France, they renamed it Julia Drotton after his wife or daughter, I forget which is very confusing because, if every time you get something, you change its name. So we try to go back to the priority name, which is Methodiana. My new neighbors just moved in. At least in my neighborhood, when us old-timers move out, 40-year-old Asian families come in with their couple, with their children. So I was telling my new Asian neighbor from China that he has a beautiful, beautiful Methodiana in the corner of his house, a gorgeous flower. Hope he won't cut it down. This is one you must see too. It's called Hermie, or Jordan's Pride. It has a lot of different names. And the original Japanese name was Hagaroma. But you must see them around here. And this is the one that sports a pink one. I see a neighbor's and about, 12–15% of the flowers are pink, but mostly this beautiful medium flower. Well, people want yellow flowers, and they're not easy to get in the Camellia world. There are 40 Camellia species that are yellow in Vietnam and China. This is one we have here, and it's a separate species, Camellia medicinal. And it's small, cup-shaped, waxy petals. And then when you hybridize with this, you get a pale. If you're lucky, you get a pale or a blush, and they're sterile. So it's been exceedingly hard to get a nice golden yellow in a camellia. Like roses, they were able to do it. You know, there's some pretty beautiful yellow roses. But there are a few. The other thing we like to do is have more fragrance. Some of the sasanquas have fragrance, and it depends on your preference. I have a friend who says, "Oh, I don't like it. It smells like cat pee." And I have other people who say, it's nice. It's musky. It's very pleasant." Others say it smells like an open new tea being opened. This one has a beautiful, sweet scent and a really nice flower. James Finley in New Zealand bred it. He spent his lifetime, he's still alive, but he spent years hybridizing to get fragrance, and this is his best. He introduced about 30. But if you wanted a nice camellia with a nice fragrance, high fragrance would be a top choice. I want to thank you for your attention, and pleased to have you. This is my resident hummingbird feeding, and looking at a couple of my camellias. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.